single whiskey. Do you copy?
Single whiskey, this is 7-6. Go ahead.
Hearing some kind of disturbing things.
I think it was really interesting in Rwanda that when people were ordered to leave, for some people, the idea of staying didn't even occur to them. And of course, the killing going on around here, the smart thing to do is get out of here. Get those who you love and safely get them out of there.
The senior rebel official said the government forces and militia were responsible for the genocide of between 500,000 and 1 million people.
I spoke to several refugees who said there aren't going to be any Tutsis left in Rwanda.
But in every situation we have a choice. I mean, the choices might be greatly restricted. There's people who'd like to take that choice away, and sometimes we'd like to give that choice to other people. But it boils down to really we do have a choice. And lucky is the person like me who had somebody like Teresa standing next to me making that choice together. Went to Africa the first time as a college kid. Came back to the States and fell in love. So as soon as I got married with this beautiful girl, 6 weeks later we moved to Zimbabwe. Our daughters were born there, so Africa just kind of got in our blood.
You know, I didn't give a whole lot of thought to what was ahead after I say I do. I knew he was an adventurous person, and I was excited about living overseas.
When we moved to Rwanda, our first projects were to build schools, working with ADRA, Adventist Development Relief Agency.
Yeah, I met Carl Wilkens in 1990. Time he came to be director for ADRA. Someone was surprised how American young have 3 kids, first that.
We were excited to be able to raise our kids in Africa. And Rwanda, like other countries we had been in, was very welcoming. The neighborhood kind of took our kids in as neighborhood kids.
The kids would go to school, Carl would do his work. I'd take the kids swimming and on birthdays. We'd go camping. So it was very normal for us. We were pretty much untouched by the conflicts that were simmering underneath.
And we had 2 Rwandans working in our home, Janvier, the night watchman, and Anita, who not only worked in our home, but she lived with us. And so Anita just proved to be a really kind, thoughtful, she was great with the kids.
She would stay with us through the week. We had a room in our house with a separate entrance, and we grew to love her very much, like part of our family.
Beginning in about January 1994 is when we started to pick up the undertones of unrest. I was the person who was supposed to bring the Rwandan and Tutsi militaries together for various dialogues, and you got a sense that there was a tension between them. Some of it you'd expect, but other aspects of it, you knew that there was something unsettling.
We didn't know the word genocide in the months before, but we could tell there was a lot of tension, and there were rumors of pickup trucks with machetes coming in. And then there were massacres. 50 people, 20 people, 100 people. You know, I started to find out some of my workers were Hutu and some were Tutsi. Up until that point, I actually didn't know who was who, and they worked together in a way that wouldn't indicate that there was a problem.
There was enough of a counterbalance of those who wanted to see peace succeed that everyone thought that any of those attempts to foil the peace would fail. Of course, all of that was proven wrong when the plane was shot down, and then in the next 24 hours there was a carefully orchestrated plan that was executed.
What's going on here, huh? We got all the kids in the hallway and the television. This is April 7, and we're watching TV in the hall. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were woken up at about 5:15, 5:20 by a lot of gunfire and stuff. The day after the plane was shot down, there was slaughter going on at an orphanage to the east, and we were talking on our ham radio with them, and they reported people coming onto their campus and people being killed there at the orphanage, and they were begging us to get help. Please send the UN. And so I managed, after quite a few attempts, to get the UN on the phone. The UN guy was really shook up, and he said they had lost control of the airport. And I'm like, what do you mean you lost control of the airport? You know, how does the UN lose control of the airport?
I remember looking across, seeing groups of mostly probably young guys. They'd be carrying sticks or machetes. They'd be moving in groups of 6 or 8 probably, going from one house to another, and it was very horrifying to think of what was happening.
People starting moving around. What's going on? Afternoon, there's a soldier from Chikondo, from our area, must kill all the Tutsi. That military who came, he put a cut, he put it for machete. That day he killed that young boy. Wow.
The term Interahamwe is a Kinyarwandan term. I believe it means something like those of us who work together. And they managed to work the idea that if they didn't kill all the Tutsi, they would be enslaved by the Tutsi, and that they were fighting in self-defense, that this was a duty of all Rwandan Hutu citizens. And that's how they were able to mobilize everybody to this very twisted collective insanity.
Towards the end of that first day of killing, a gang actually gathered at our gate. We didn't know about this until the next morning, but we found out that our neighbor ladies had come out, stood between the gates, stood in front of these guys with clubs and machetes, and they said, no, you can't go into our house. They started telling stories about our family, doing little acts of kindness. Basically, they said their kids play with our kids. We were shocked to find out that we had been targeted, but then even more amazed at the courage of these ladies. They risked their lives for us.
My first and only priority in many ways was finding out where every single American was and how we would get them safely out.
So it probably would be Friday evening. Teresa and I would start making the decision about what we're going to do, and especially about Anita and Janvier, who were targeted because of their Tutsi ID cards. The embassy had made it really clear that Rwandans could not be evacuated in the convoy, that would put everybody at risk. And so that option was out. Thinking that they could stay and barricade themselves in the house, nah, the house would be broken into and they would be slaughtered. And so really, there just didn't seem like many options, except if, you know, I was able to stay, perhaps my presence would stop the militia. There was a huge respect for foreigners in Rwanda, a real valuing of foreigners.
His personality, his heart was such that there was no other option, because he saw people suffering and he can't just leave it and not do anything about it. For me, you know, it's a matter of, you know, can I stand with that?
My parents were visiting at the time, and I was really glad my dad could drive the family out so Teresa could be with the kids, but still.
I think Carl recognized it was a hard decision, not just for him, but yet we could be looking at the possibility of never seeing each other again.
The harder part of this decision was her part, definitely. Much, much tougher. For her to leave with the kids.
And I know at that point in time his thinking was, and I agreed totally. I knew as adjutant director, he's there for not just the development aspect, but for the relief aspect too. He's been already working in these camps. And so it just seemed that it wouldn't be right not to stay. You know, the right thing to do is to stay.
I'll never forget standing by our bedroom window, looking out at the city, which is built on hills there in Kigali, and holding her and thinking, you know, this is what it's come to, and this is the right thing to do. And so I'm on the radio now, and I was telling Laura at the embassy, I'm sending my wife and family to the American ambassador's home. Over. She says, what do you mean you're sending them? We're all leaving. Everybody, shredding documents, locking the doors, everybody leaving. Over. And I said, no, I'm not leaving. He kind of paused, and you don't have a choice. And yes, I do have a choice, and you can see this going back and forth. And finally she says, okay, then I need you to sign on a piece of paper that you've refused the help of the United States government to leave Rwanda.
And I remember thinking how incredibly hard of a decision that must have been to be separated from his wife and kids and make the decision to stay. He had the opportunity, because he had an American passport in his hand, to leave the country and find safety. And instead, he was choosing to stay and let the people that he loved the most in this world go on overland without him.
In leaving, I did feel like, we were abandoning him. And though he tells me he never felt abandoned, I just, when we're all leaving and you're leaving someone behind, you do get that sense that you're abandoning them.
A beautiful sunny day. This is Tuesday, and nobody can believe what is hidden by this beautiful sunny day.
Here you can see is the corner of our yard. This house over here is just on the other side of the street. You can see the hole in their metal roof from where a small rocket landed this morning.
There was a 24/7 curfew. The government said nobody is allowed out of their house. The only people on the streets were the people who were doing the slaughter. The pastor and his wife, who had joined me, she would buy stolen food or propane bottle over the fence. It was a survival time, those 3 weeks. How can we get enough food and water just to survive?
Electricity went off yesterday, and it's so... Come in, Ma.
During those first 3 weeks, there were several incidents when soldiers came, wanted to know who was there. I mean, there was this time that we actually paid off the militia about $100 to save the lives of the people in our house. You just did what you had to do. Each threat, each challenge that came.
Fluffy doesn't seem to be bothered by the shooting. And Poacher up there, he's just looking all around and... What's up? That seems too close. Oh, here's the whole bedroom radio station.
So I think it was about the second week of the genocide that, it was really sinking in on me. I might not see my family again. I started thinking, I gotta leave some sort of record. And so I found some old medical lecture tapes that I'd gotten from my brother and started recording over these tapes what was happening.
Okay, this is Sunday morning, April 24. And should have a radio contact here with Teresa very soon.
I remember listening for her voice. There'd be static on the radio and stuff, and then I'd hear this sweet voice come over the radio. 7676, this is Tango Whiskey, do you copy? And I'd push the button and go, yes, Tango Whiskey, this is 76, go ahead.
Initially, when he wasn't out and able to move around, we'd talk for a long time. I think maybe up to a couple hours.
I would ask her at different times, are you still okay with the decision, Is everything really all right? And trying to sense from 1,000 miles away through a staticky radio how she's doing. And she always just came back to me rock solid, like, yes, absolutely.
Usually we'd talk once in the morning and then again late at night when he got back. And no matter what the newspapers were saying, no matter what the newscasts were saying, I'd hear all kinds of reports about the horrible things that were going on. But just to know that he was doing okay and that he came back safe every night was huge.
Eventually, an announcement came over the national radio. The government was giving permission for people to come out and get a travel document, a laissez-passer. And so when I heard that word over the radio, I thought, okay, this is our chance. Because during that 3-week time, I was thinking, okay, I stayed to hopefully save the lives of these two people, but there's got to be more. The morning I actually left the house, I remember thinking, we've developed a routine, and this sort of feels like there's security here within the fence of our yard in our house. And now I'm venturing out, and I wasn't sure what I would find out there. I had talked on the radio to the Red Cross. I knew the killing was still going on. So yeah, it was with a lot of uncertainty that I ventured out that first day. It was great to have Pastor Soraya along. I really counted on his advice. And then to have Dawson, one of my ADRA guys. We had been through tough scrapes already. Backing the car down the driveway, I knew the first roadblock was less than 100 yards away. Fortunately, it was a neighbor, the tailor man, who was there. Strange to see him, instead of at his sewing machine, having a machine gun in his hand. But he wasn't too difficult. But there was another roadblock we came up to, and they were shouting, "Belge, Belge," as we drove there. You know, they saw a white guy in the car, and I guess thought I was Belgian. And I said, no, I'm an American. I'm not Belgian. And the guy says, good. You know, there was a rumor going around that Belgians had shot the plane down. He says, because if you were a Belgian, and he kind of draws his knife across his throat and laughs. He says, this is what would happen to you. And you know, as we wandered through some of the neighborhoods, it was really strange. They were deserted like ghost towns. I remember this one guy sitting on a couch. They drug it out next to the street, and he had an old like shotgun across his lap and a monkey on a leash. And there were little kids who were playing with Westerner toys at a few places. I'm sure they hadn't seen those toys before. And, you know, stuff was drug out of houses and on the streets. It was apocalyptic. It was just really like a whole different world. Finally, we made it to the office of the government headquarters. And as we were waiting there, I saw a man walk in with a military uniform. The guy had a real presence about him. Greeted people as he walked around. And as he came and talked to us, I introduced myself. And I explained that ADRA was still there. You know, not that we had much, but we wanted to help any way we could. And he said, well, yeah, there are some groups of orphans that are needing help. I can send you with my social affairs man to visit these orphanages, and you can see what you can do. It was strange that this man actually ended up giving me my marching orders. He's the one who, to a large degree, determined what I did for the remainder of the genocide. And he quickly put together the document I needed, the travel permit, signed it and stamped it. And I walked out of the office with this paper that was going to be so crucial to moving around the city. The first time I drove into Gisimba Orphanage there with Colonel Renzaho's assistant, I saw these little bumps in the parking lot in the dirt, you know, they're fresh mounds. And I said to Damas, the director of the orphanage, I said, are those graves? And yeah, they were graves. They were of children, orphans who had died not from the active slaughter, but died of diarrhea, dysentery. There was no question we had to get water to the kids, but how are we going to do it? And who's going to help me? And I can't imagine doing this without my two ADRA men, Dawson and Gasigwa.
Dawson came to my home, so he told me, Wilkens is still in here. Oh, that's good. How? He's working, he wants you to go to work. Oh, that's good. That's good news.
That was definitely a regular part of every time I got out of my house, get water to the orphans, get water to the orphans. And in between, try to find some food, try to find some medicine. The fighting sometimes was so intense I couldn't venture out. But each time I was pinned down in the house, I would picture these kids with their little metal cup. You know, they would line up when I got there with water, just for one cup of water. The dependability of Dawson and Gasigwa during this tough time was just amazing. And you know, both of those guys had people in their homes. Gasigwa had more than 40 people that came looking for protection.
People to come to my home. Yeah, come in. There's nothing, what can I do? I open, especially kids.
And he said when the Interahamwe would come to the place, he would give them a chicken. I mean, he had this little chicken farm, and he'd give them a chicken, like a chicken for a life. And as I got out and I started to meet both the players in terms of those orchestrating the killing, but then also meeting people like Damas at Gisimba Orphanage with his 80 that eventually grew to more than 400, you started to see places where opportunities where you could make a difference. So Teresa would send some money through the UN, and from the UN to me, and from me to some of the killers who were in charge of the downtown section of the city. They were my bank, and they would change the money to local currency. And then through some ladies at the market, I found out thieves who had a stash of powdered milk, and I'd make a deal and buy powdered milk from them them. But then I couldn't take all the powdered milk from them to my house, they'd rob me. To the orphanage, they'd rob me. So I would take the powdered milk to Renzaho's office, who gave me storage space there. And it was a network of thieves and killers who helped me to supply the orphanage and even the colonel providing storage space. Pretty bizarre.
I got here in late May, and by that time most of the killing in the city was pretty well over, but there was still a lot of fighting. And there were a lot of areas where we found it very difficult to travel. And Carl's voice would come over the radio in the middle of the night, reporting in from these places that we were afraid to travel. And we just couldn't understand how he was able to get from place to place to check on his orphans, as he did every day, and still live. He went through the worst areas of town. And when I say worst, it was unimaginable, thinking back on it. I tried going through some of them in the daytime, usually with escorts and armed people with me, and still it was frightening. You'd be surrounded by craved people with death in their eyes, with all sorts of hideous weapons, homemade usually, clubs with nails. I still don't understand how he survived, or how he was able to do the things he did. Most of our people were just absolutely astounded at his courage and at his success.
There's this one water story, I still shake my head when I think about it. We had managed to come up with some barrels from a factory. I think they were syrup or something. They were gunky, they needed to be cleaned out. And the water point was just clogged with hundreds of people. So asking them, excuse me, while I clean these barrels, you know, I was like, that's not gonna work. And somebody pointed out that there was a faucet, a water tap down the road a couple hundred yards. And I said, well, won't there be long lines there? They said, well, there's sometimes sniper fire there, but you could check it out. And so I thought, well, I went down kind of cautiously. Sure enough, there were kids there filling up their own water jugs, and they all gathered around, Mzungu, Mzungu, you know, that's what they would call foreigners. What are you doing? And there was one older boy among them who spoke French, and so I could communicate with him. And I explained I needed to wash these barrels, and these kids all volunteered to jump in, and actually we formed an assembly line, and one little one put her hands in a funnel shape over the hole and top of the barrel, and someone else would pour some sand in and someone some water. Not too much water, we don't want it too heavy, and they would roll it up a little hill and back down, slosh it around. Someone else would pour it out, glug, 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 and then machine gun fire tore at the metal roof above us, and we all dove for cover, and I'm thinking, this thing can't go on like this. Somebody's gonna get hurt, you know? The kid who was the leader, he's like, no, just hold on, it'll be calm, and his influence really did have an impact on the other kids. And after a little bit, it calmed down, and back to your stations, and for probably 2 hours, I worked with these kids cleaning all of my barrels so I could haul water. And boy, it was hot, and could have been just miserable work, but those kids made a game out of it.
This kind of experience, I think it could have just killed me inside, as you saw so much killing and the suffering and of the little kids, especially working with orphans. Down the street here, we were always concerned about their safety. One day a mortar landed in the front yard and it killed one, and the second one just took most of her shoulder off. So angry, you just want to kill someone yourself as you're trying to change the dressing on this little 3-year-old shoulder. You're peeling the gauze back, and she's trying to be brave, and yet she's crying. You're so angry at people, but then you see the courage in this little kid's face, and they're ready to just keep on. They're never going to give up. And so, if the kid's never going to give up, then you know you can never give up. And you just have to you keep going.
A lot of people share the same concern as the people in Rwanda, but not just anybody was willing to take the risk. I thought, well, part of it is that your personality doesn't shy away from things like this, where a lot of the rest of us do. Over.
Roger, roger.
So anyway, I knew it was more than just your interest in taking risks. Over.
I I guess one of the things that when you talk about the adventure element here is I like a lot of different things. There's no question about adventure and things that I guess some people would think are dangerous. The difference with this situation here is it's just no games, and there is real pain that I don't know any deeper pain that we have here on this earth that people are going through right now, and then I experience kinda, I don't know if you'd say vicariously or whatever. The stakes are real. No blanks are being shot.
Time had gone on, and you thought this is going to end, it's got to end, but it went day after day, week after week, eventually month after month, and it still looked like there was no end in sight. And fear was so real, especially the first days. You don't want to die. You love your wife, you love your kids, you want to be reunited with them. But fear would stop you from doing what God wanted you to do. And so if you ask Him, He overcomes that fear. So you say, okay, Lord, if I die today, you love my wife and kids more than me. You know how to take care of them better than I ever could. I want to be the one to do it, but I'll trust you. And once you kind of give up like that, the sting and the nastiness of fear is gone. And so many of us, me, everybody, we get sidetracked at times, and we make these choices that are really destroying ourselves, destroying our brothers and our sisters. But when you choose to look for the right way in making decisions and in taking actions and doing something, you know there's a reason to be on earth, and you know that the whole world just hasn't gone crazy as it looked like here in this country.
One of the toughest days of the genocide started out just kind of ordinary tough. Gasikwa and I were trying to get water out to the orphans. We took our truck to the water source and filled our barrels with water and then headed towards the orphanage. And as we came in the gate, the young brother of the director, Jean-Francois, came out, and he says, "Whoa, you're coming today as an answer to prayer." They were here yesterday, and the last day or two they had killed about 6 people at the orphanage, and they had just given the message the day before that they would come back the next day and kill everybody. They said, "We don't care Hutu or Tutsi, everybody here needs to get out or get killed." He's not even finished telling me the story, and all of a sudden around us we start to see them materialize. Some start to come in the main gate, others are coming through the hedges.
So Interahamwe was crossing around it for that orphanage. Time we see Carl Wilkens, he's starting talking each other. What's that Muzungu doing here?
This was the beginning of what became between 2 and honestly I can't remember, 2-3 hour standoff. The militia just didn't move. They kind of positioned themselves all around the orphanage, but as long as I was there, they seemed not to be coming in.
Kids was inside, they was afraid, they was crying, there was many people inside, the mothers and the fathers who were hiding there.
I saw their leader drive by once. I saw him walk by another time. I said to Gasikwa, siphon the water out of the barrels into the reservoir as slow as you can. We got to make this process drag on as long as we can. But eventually Gasikwa was finished.
And the Interahamwe was still there. That's wanted to move there. Waiting for Carl Wilkens to go. And the Carl Wilkens also does wanted to go.
I remember talking, Mama Papa Zero, that was the UN humanitarian. Mama Papa Zero, this is Adra 1. Come in and yes, Adra 1, go ahead. And then my radio started beeping, indicating the battery is about dying. And I knew that they couldn't come really to my help. I mean, they couldn't get to that part of the city anyway. But I was just calling for whoever. I talked to Philip at the Red Cross, you know, come in, and Philip came in and says, "Hey, the director, Damas, is here in my office." I said, "Well, good, don't let him come back here. They're looking for him." And eventually, Philip was able to get a hold of the police, the gendarmes, and what kind of brought a pause in this standoff was a pickup truck load with 7 gendarmes come in the driveway. And their lieutenant gets out of the cab, looks around, military guy, used to sizing things up. And he comes to me, I introduced myself, I said, "Thank you for coming. Can you spend the night with the orphans?" No, we're too outnumbered. Listen, this is, you know, he's a man of action. This is what we got to do. He says, "I'll stay here with my men, but you need to get us reinforcements." At this point, the young brother, Jean-Francois, says, no, don't go, Wilkens. As soon as you go, they're going to kill us. Please don't go. And he starts to kind of get teary and don't go. And I'm looking at the lieutenant. Can I trust this lieutenant? You know, because some of the police had joined in massacres. So is this guy just wanting to get rid of me and he'll join the militia for this massacre? Or will he honestly stand there and hold them off? And I decided to trust him. I mean, it was a hard decision. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt like I was gonna vomit. Am I just trying to save my own skin, you know, or is this really the right thing to do? Trust this lieutenant, move forward. And I said, listen, Jean-Francois, I will go get help. If I don't get help, I'll come back myself. I will come back. And it just seemed like a pretty weak thing that I was leaving him with, a weak promise. But I left. I thought, man, they could stop me at the roadblock right outside the orphanage and kill me there. Or maybe I'm going to hear gunfire as I leave. And, well, I didn't. I went to the colonel's office, and I knew he was out of town already, but I still went to his office. And I found the secretary there, and the secretary says to me, as if it's good news, well, no, the colonel's not here, but the prime minister's here. Well, they had killed the prime minister the second day of the genocide, and the extremists put in their own prime minister. And so the secretary's telling me, ask the prime minister for help. And I'm like, what? This is the one who's in charge of the genocide. Why would I ask this person? This just made no sense at all to me. But there's a lot of stuff that wasn't making sense. The prime minister, Kambanda was his name, came down the hallway. He's got a whole little entourage with him, and they're coming down the hall. I step out in the middle of the hall, kind of, you know, stopping them, put my hand out, introduce myself. I'm Carl Wilkens, the director of ADRA, and he goes, oui, je te connais. You know, this is going on in French. I know you, he says, and how's your work going? And I'm like, well, it's not going good. In fact, at Gasimba Orphanage, there's a massacre that's about to happen if it hasn't happened already. I just kind of blurted it out, and he turns, talks, and he says, yeah, you know, after talking with his guys, we know about that situation. Those orphans are going to be okay. And kind of like, oh, okay. Thank you, and I shake hands, and he moves on down the hall, kind of leaves me stunned there, and yeah, I don't know any other reason except this guy. He stopped the massacre. A couple days later, we were able to get the orphans moved out of that really horrible situation to a less horrible situation, and it just amazed me that this man who later will be convicted of genocide is helping me save the lives of these orphans.
When I think back to those days and try to remember as vividly as I can what happened, you know, the strongest memory I have is of this deep, gnawing fear that just kind of ate away at your bowels every day. You'd wake up to the sound of gunfire. In the night, you'd hear the dogs fighting over the corpses. In the daytime, if you moved around the city, there was a smell of death everywhere. What made it possible to keep going was the sense that it would end. One day, it would end. And I can remember the day it ended very clearly. Went from a night of almost complete gunfire all night and quite a few near misses to silence. Sudden and frightening silence. And it was almost a day before we heard the first tentative sounds of life coming back. People timidly coming out of the Amahoro Stadium or crawling up from whatever holes they'd been hiding in, looking around, speaking quietly.
When the genocide ended, when the RPF drove the extremists out of power and out of the country, that first night was really quiet. It was almost hard to sleep, it was so quiet. And then it was just a few days before I was able to leave, climb into this Canadian C-130 and fly to my family to meet up with Therese and the kids. And I remember touching down in Nairobi and trying to see out the window of this kind of cargo transport plane and stretching, where's my family? And actually not expecting to see them until I went through some sort of immigration or something. And I was so surprised when they let down the steps, you know, of this cargo plane, and I came down and looked, and there was Teresa and the kids right there on the tarmac a few hundred feet away, and ran to them, and the kids running towards me, and down on my knees hugging and kissing, and up with Teresa and hugging and kissing. And
seeing that plane coming in, landing, and then watching him come towards us, the kids running towards him, and yeah, it was really amazing, more than what we'd been dreaming about all the days and nights before as it led up to that. I remember Mindy saying, "Dad, you need a haircut." And of course for me, just hugging him and realizing, you know, how he's a lot thinner than 3 months before. It was a really good reunion. It took some time to absorb the idea that, hey, this finally has ended, but it just was exciting to have him back.
Just incredible memories of the beginning of like a whole new world, a whole new life. By many people's standards, I should have been slaughtered with those 800,000 other people who were slaughtered during this time, but I wasn't. I'm alive, and now I get to see my kids grow up and you know, at their high school and college graduation, and yeah, it was whole new appreciation for life. Fortunately, Anita and Janvier survived. They've both gotten married, they have children. Interestingly, Janvier joined the military and has actually done 2 tours of duty in Darfur, standing up against genocide there in the Sudan. And Anita has 2 beautiful sons, a wonderful husband. Tragically, she lost nearly everybody in her family. A little brother who was out of the country and a sister hiding in a convent survived, but parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, gone.
I remember, you know, talking on the open line back to European Command and to the State Department about Carl's decision, and many of the folks saying, well, did you accurately convey the situation? Does he understand, truly understand the decision he's making? And I remember, you know, saying back to them, he does, and that is why he's staying, because he believes if he keeps a presence there, if he keeps that mission open, that he can make a difference. I really wished, in hindsight, that we could have done the same thing at the American Embassy. And it is probably my greatest regret that we didn't keep the embassy open. At the time, policymakers said it was better to close the embassy down. Looking back now, boy, what a world of difference we could have made if we would have maintained that American presence.
Myself, who was fighting each other, is my brothers, he was there, sister there, but no one helped. But Carl Wilkens got to help some people, help the orphanage. And I saw he changed my life many things until now. To do good things, better than me to do wrong things. I saw people never help one another, and it was very painful my heart. Until now, how people run, how people died, no help one another, kill someone, no do anything wrong. He changed my life.
this good?
Yep.
I won't get everybody, but